And welcome back to some more World and Economica. So according to last episode, there was some unmotivation and some more despair than the hope. But it went back up for a little while. Because for a moment there, I thought they're not going to make it to first place when it comes to the stock market contest. So let's continue reading. It was then, perhaps after 30 minutes had elapsed, finally with a God damn it. Finally with a resounding tap, she looked up. Immediately after that, the CPU and HDD within her terminal started emitting a unique sound. There was a bar on the screen showing that calculations were in progress as the color of the bar filled from the left side to the right. As the stock data was completely inserted and dissected, perhaps it was making sense of things. After many seconds of silence, a list of stocks appeared. Hagana then looked at me. Which looks good? My job had finally come to an end. It was written all over the satisfied expression on Hagana's face. By her side, I took a peek at Hagana's terminal, stretched out my hand, and tapped the terminal screen. On the list, there was a surprising number of dead margin trades. In addition, ideally the ones that worked easily with our predictions would be best. I'd especially love it if people would jump on board automatically without a single thought. Those who had surrendered their thinking to machines were subhuman existences who had lost their privilege of being human. Barton's words came to mind suddenly. These were the appropriate ones to feed off, I suppose. This one. Putting faith in my trusty instincts, I selected the appropriate stock. Black Chocolate Corporated. A name that sounded like some sort of joke. Sounded like some sort of joke. Why did they call it Black Chocolate Corporated? Sounds tasty. Exactly. Hagana said that spontaneously. You like chocolate? When I asked her, Hagana's face stiffened and she nodded. Yep, she can't even resist. A little bit. What do you mean by a little bit? You should say whether you like it or not. A little bit can't be expressed mathematically. How do you express your little bit of liking in chocolate in a mathematic sense? Hagana's words were enough to make me laugh. Can't be helped. Hagana stood up and yawned loudly. I'm tired. It's your turn now, Hal. She wobbled and stood up while pointing at me. Get out of my way. Jeez, hey, what are you... Eh? Hagana looked back at me, as if I was acting weird. Except, well, Hagana was standing next to my bed and had begun to take her clothes off. No matter how you looked at it, Hagana was the one acting weird. I'm tired, really. As she talked, I could see that she was drowsy. Above anything I was saying, she was focused on undoing the buttons of her shirt one by one. I couldn't stop her, so I did all I could to avert my gaze. Hagana put her pajamas on silently, and with a final soft yawn, she crawled into the bed. At that point, I thought I could stop looking away. I thought it would have been better if she went back to her room. On the other hand, I wasn't opposed to this either. Two people sleeping together was warmer than one sleeping alone. Well, that could be true. I imagined that Hagana thought that way too, and there's no way she would have been unhappy about it. Move over a bit. A sigh was mixed in with my words. Hagana didn't respond, but she did move over. I lay down as well as I could. I lay down as well as I could on one corner to sleep. Hagana's back was to mine. As expected, it would be impossible for us to be mutually this close together when awake. Somehow I couldn't fall asleep, probably because of that. Even though I was tired, I couldn't sleep. Even though I was sleepy, I couldn't sleep. It felt as if there was some obstruction that hadn't been overcome yet. Hell. In the middle of things, Hagana suddenly spoke. Huh? No words. I responded in question, but Hagana did not reply. What is it? It seemed there was no response forthcoming. I was going to ask her once more, but I realized that she might have been talking in her sleep. That would be pretty embarrassing too, but she wasn't going to respond either way. I closed my eyes and made an effort to sleep, and it was at that moment that I heard Hagana again. Hal. No words. I didn't say anything as I looked over my shoulder. Oh, god damn it. I didn't say anything as I looked over my shoulder. There. Hagana had her back to me, so I couldn't see her face, but I was aware that she was awake. I have a question to ask you, and finally she managed to say something. I turned back around and responded, What is it? Hagana became quiet again. However, I hadn't expected Hagana to turn her body towards me. No words. Suddenly I felt as if I couldn't breathe, and any sleepiness disappeared instantly. Hagana placed her forehead on the nape of my neck, which caused my body to freeze up completely. Will you answer my question? In that situation, with that question, as a man, there was only one way I could answer. What is it? I gulped and continued. Is there something else you need to ask me about? What came to mind didn't amount to more than that, and anything else that I could think of, I could not manage to say. Yet, Hagana didn't acknowledge those words right away. I thought I would feel annoyed about her silence, but suddenly it occurred to me how stupid my response was. Tomorrow, what will happen if you don't win? No words. I was so surprised that the words wouldn't come out. Hagana's words went through my back and pierced my heart. Tomorrow, what if I lost? With that, I now realized what was stuck on my mind. I don't understand the reason why you suddenly had an interest in the contest, Hal, without understanding the assumptions. The conclusions can't be understood. Hagana put those small hands of hers on my back. Her hands were unbelievably warm. If you lose, what will happen? It was just like Hagana to not ask what I would do if I lost. If I lost, I would be sold and disappear. The way she asked seemed to call out for an answer like that. My heart was beating rapidly now. It seemed to become so loud that I was dreading the possibility of Hagana hearing it. Perhaps she could hear it. For this long stretch of time, Hagana was cuddled up next to me. Whether we lose or win, the result won't change, after all. Huh? There is something that I haven't said to you yet. Readying myself, I turned around in bed. Within the narrow confines of the futon, Hagana was in front of me. With one hand always across her chest, I could see that she looked cold. What? When the contest ends, I'll leave this place, probably. No words for her. She wore a puzzled look on her face. After staring at me for some time, she finally asked back, Eh? You see, someone invited me to join them. No words. He's a pro investor. On top of that, an extremely good one. Hagana looked at me blankly. While she stared at me, only her lips moved coolly. And? My trading technique and his methodology are very compatible with each other, so probably I will become his apprentice. There was no reason for me to say it outright. Without a doubt, things could become bad otherwise. Although Barton was rather busy, he took the time to follow our training record. Compatible? Yeah. More than me? Hagana was straight to the point. I felt she might have been angry as well. No, I changed my mind on that. If I had just made an excuse arbitrarily, then Hagana would be angry. Thinking back on it now, I realized that it was jealousy. More than me. After asking once more, I had no choice but to answer. The path you walk is different from mine. What do you mean? Depending on the answer, I'll strangle you. Oh, God. Depending on the answer, I'll strangle you to death. Hagana's intense eyes were ideal for times like these. Well, how should I put this? Well, don't you feel that you're merely compensating for what I am lacking in? Her program was a clear indicator of that. As a human being, at the limits of my abilities, I was being assisted by the power of technology. However, Hagana did not respond and her eyes urged me to continue. But The person who invited me on, he's someone who is far more amazing than I am. On top of that, he's far more skilled in things I'm aiming for. Based on numbers in the market, I could see through the perceptions of people to turn a profit, but Barton looked at things from a more fundamental level in order to understand people's thinking. Stock was a necessity to move a corporation forward, and a corporation was a gathering of people. Thus, his trading technique was on a level 2 to 3 times above where I stood. So that is why I want to learn how to trade from him. Take me with you. Well, that was pretty sudden. That was Hagana's immediate reply. That rather surprised me. I never imagined that she would say something like that. I will be useful to you, Hal. Besides, there's also the issue of the depths of the people in this town. That won't work, though. That was what I said, and then I said it once more. That won't work at all. Hagana was not sad at all. Just that it was her usual expression while her lips stopped moving, as if she were about to say something before she pursed her lips tightly. With that expression, the only thing that betrayed any emotion was those lips. Those lips tightened. For the depths of the townspeople, with just a bit of time, you could take care of it, though. I can't. Of course you can, don't lie. When I said that, she raised an eyebrow. Hagana was incapable of telling a lie. Why? Hagana asked me, but maybe she was more questioning whether it was because of her investing technique. I hesitated. Hagana asked once more, "Why do you need to follow that man? Don't you already have all the money you need?" I was taken by surprise by words that I didn't expect to hear. Of course, Hagana was serious, and certainly that was the result of her understanding. Hagana looked at me, and even now looked like she was on the verge of crying. Or rather, because of the darkness I wasn't really sure, but it's possible that she was already crying. The money isn't enough. It isn't enough at all. Then you can grow it. That was Hagana's response. From the nasal sound of her voice, I knew that she was crying. I was lost, and I hesitated before I clasped Hagana's hand. It isn't enough. Not at all. But 10 million mules is not enough. What I want is 10 billion mules. Or maybe even 100 billion mules. There were playthings for children of that sort. Paper money that had endless zeros written on them. 100 billion mules was something like that to most people. It's like the dream, or better yet, unless you win a lottery ticket, that is. But currently, the richest person of all mankind, the legendary trader called Mr. Infallible, had assets totaling 82 billion mules. Thus, 100 billion mules was not an impossible number. In Newton City, there's a road called Schrödinger Street. It's the focal point of financial alchemists who work at investment banks and hedge funds. It's where I must battle it out and win at all costs. For that, I must first train under the person who invited me on. I couldn't imagine that Hagana understood. What I was talking about. Thus, when Hagana opened her mouth, the words that came out were not entirely unexpected. I don't understand. What will you do with all that money? This was Hagana, who, when given 200 mules, would find no use for it. I wonder if she asked that question only because she didn't understand. Could be. It's either could be, it couldn't be. I looked away from Hagana. As for that question on what I do with all that money, I had that answer. But I was scared. I was scared of being laughed at after talking about it. But Hagana looked at me intently. Those eyes, they were frantic. Lisa had said to me to not push Hagana aside. If I were to keep this to myself, then I would be pushing Hagana aside. Having said that, opening myself up was indeed scary. Yet I looked back at Hagana's eyes. Before Hagana had started trading using her software, she showed her courage while moving by my side as I traded. Seeing her absorb everything on the screen brought up a particular moment. During that time, while she struggled, she continued to do her work as a teacher. At that time, Hagana said something to me. They also have dreams, she said. I have a dream. Gee, what dream is it this time? Hagana looked at me, and then she spoke. What is it? Are you going to laugh? But even if it were pathetic to do so, I couldn't help but ask such a question. Hagana stared at me and, after a while, gave me an honest answer. I don't know. A bit too honest. I was hoping that she would at least lie and say that she wouldn't laugh, but for Hagana, if there was even the slightest chance of that happening, she wouldn't say it. But I want to hear it. Hagana said it clearly. She wasn't lying. She really did want to hear it. I took one step forward. If I were to have 100 billion moles, there is something I want to do. What? I was born on the moon. I somehow thought that she was going to say something suddenly, but Hagana did not respond. On that note, I continued. I'm different from those born on Earth. My birthplace was on the frontier of mankind's expansion. As always, Hagana continued to look intently at me, though I wonder if I've seen this expression in her eyes before. And so? So there is no frontier for me. Frontier. Have you seen the Sea of Tranquility Memorial Hall? It was a place to preserve the simple footprints of the first man to set foot on the moon. Hagana shook her head slowly. But I know about it. There, the footprints of the first person on the moon are there. You want that memorial hall for yourself? Without thinking, I laughed at Hagana's words. Hagana looked hurt by my action and glared at me quickly. Sorry, but no, that's not it. What's the point of buying the footprints? Well, then what? No, what I mean is that, like those footprints, I want to set foot on undiscovered territory as well. So, basically, in other words, an adventurer. Hagana, who had gotten angry at being laughed at, continued to glare at me with those intense eyes, but she did not try to shake my hand off her. Undiscovered territory? Yeah, but as Hagana said that, she looked somewhat downcast. She was thinking about it. Where could such a place be? The moon's surface had been completely traversed, and underground excavation was already progressing. Long before Earth's surface had been completely mapped by satellites, there was no mountain mankind hadn't set foot on, and no seabed that hadn't been explored with observation vessels. I wasn't sure whether Hagana was thinking about human history or not, but after thinking for a while, she turned her focus back on me. I can't come up with a place such as that. I then responded proudly. Mars. Within my grasp, Hagana's arm stiffened. Perhaps she was taken by surprise there, but Mars is... In the past, there was the Mars Immigration Project. With the orbital elevator, it was theoretically possible to reach Mars. It's possible, huh? But while the project was progressing, the moon declared itself to be an independent nation, and it supposedly became a political issue. Questions like whether Mars should become an independent nation, and wouldn't that lead to the flames of interplanetary war in the future? Should a planet become an independent nation? Besides, development on the lunar surface isn't over yet, so those plans ground to a halt. Hagana held her breath as I spoke. So, if I can earn 100 billion moles, I wish to continue that project with my own money. I'm not very smart, so it is impossible for me to attend Lunar City University, study space engineering, and become an astronaut, but as a sponsor, I can gather people with the power of money, and even aid in the construction of space vessels. 100 billion moles is the kind of money that would be enough to manage a large country. Also, there is someone who has reached 80 million moles. It's not a pipe dream. It isn't a pipe dream at all. I held Hagana's hand tightly as I spoke quietly yet passionately. Up until now, this was a dream that I'd spoken to no one about. If it weren't for this darkness, I'm sure it would be obvious that I was blushing a great deal. But in the end, Hagana did not laugh. Instead, she said this to me. Do you really think you can do it? A realistic question. More than wanting to laugh, I felt my chest tighten. This question was enough to make me want to cry pathetically. That's not how it is, right? At some point, the hand I was holding Hagana's hand with ended up being held in hers instead. Keep going until it works, right? It is not that different. I had intended to say that, but honestly, I wasn't sure whether or not that would have been too dubious. That was how bewildered I was by Hagana's words. Amazing. I think it's an amazing dream. Hagana squeezed my hand in return, closed her eyes, and swayed back and forth gently as she spoke. She looked like a clumsy robot that wasn't capable of showing emotion in any other way. So, for your dream, it is necessary for you to win the contest? She asked me, and I couldn't hold Hagana's simple way of stating things against her. Is it necessary or unnecessary? No, it's necessary. Never mind. I'm tired. I can't help it. It's like I can't even see it. Anyway, stating things against her. Besides, at this point, I couldn't hide it any longer. No, that is a different matter. Different? Yeah, the contest isn't for my sake. I don't understand. Hagana replied honestly, and that honestly caused me some level of anguish. It's for your sake. Hagana looked at me. Eh? I said it before. The person who invited me on said that he could only take me. I won't be able to vest here anymore. That is why, well, as I hesitated, Hagana spoke. What? So I thought that you should have funds to be able to continue to live with Lisa and be able to attend university. 200,000 moles shouldn't be enough, right? You won't lose her books 4 times, right? That last one was a joke, but it seemed that Hagana was actually angry as she kicked my foot under the covers. Ouch! Stop kicking me! Idiot. She said that as she kicked me, but it did dawn on me. Hagana wasn't angry at me because I was talking about her having lost that book. She was angry about something completely different. For my sake, why? Hagana cried and closed her eyes tightly as she hung her head down in shame. I was confused as to what I should do. Immediately afterward, Hagana let go of my hand and lashed out with all her energy. You idiot! I was falling to the ground along with the futon, and right when I was on the verge of doing so, my hand reached the floor. But this time Hagana was facing the other direction on the bed and was curled up in a ball. At that point, I decided to just leave her be, and I stood up after getting my feet off the bed. The futon was on the ground, so I could clearly see Hagana curled up in a ball. She was curled up like a newborn, but her hands were wrapped across her legs. Looking at her now, she seemed completely different from when she was in her room, so scared that she couldn't even recognize Lisa. Thinking about that, it might have been because of Hagana's face the moment she kicked me out. The moment I fell out of the bed, I got a clear look at Hagana's face. She was apparently very embarrassed. Overwhelmed with happiness and embarrassed by it, it seemed. I hesitated for a moment, but at this rate, Hagana might catch a cold. But I also wanted to sleep in bed. After all, tomorrow was the last day of training. In the end, I returned the futon to the bed and got back in. Hagana continued to stay curled up, facing the wall. I thought I looked the other way as well, but I scolded myself for being too spineless. Or in other words, stupid. If you ask me whether this was a buy or a sell, I say it's a buy. I slept face up. Hagana didn't say anything else, but whether in my dreams or in the back of my mind, I felt rather refreshed to have said it all. Also, it was huge that Hagana didn't outright reject or laugh at the idea. I felt my body warm up, and once sleepiness set in, I moved my hand. I reached out for Hagana's hand as it was wrapped around her legs, and held on tightly. Not tightly, lightly. I thought it said that. For a moment, Hagana's body shrank back, but she did not try to shake me off. We slept just like that, much like how the moon and the earth were tied together by gravity. That thin line connected Hagana and me together securely. The next day, Hagana and I decided what we were going to do. Hagana was not looking Hagana was not going to look at her own terminal. It was because she knew she had done all that she needed to do. So all that was left was to be at my side, watching the results. But that did not mean that she would not be of any use. Exactly. She had to be there. She belonged there. It's game time. The instant trading began. I mumbled that to myself while Hagana nodded silently. On the last day of the investment contest, there were red letters across the trading screen saying just that. The time until 5 p.m. was counted down, stirring things up for the participants. The number of participants dwindled even more than it did yesterday, it seemed. Looking at the entire marketplace, stock prices largely did not change. Instead, the trade volume of stocks was completely different from before. Buying and selling, it was something that happened when the buyer and the seller appeared. They were like fish, struggling in a largely dried up lake, trying to find water to swim in. And breathe. But I saw something different being projected. I've seen it in a film once, a scene where fish are swimming in the oceans of the earth. A net is raised and a large catch of squirming fish are caught. A big haul. People from Earth, which had a long history, had managed to craft out a wonderful phrase. How? I know. I just looked at clusters of other stocks, but maybe she was uneasy that I wasn't looking at the stock we decided on. But I had complete faith in the data Hagana had calculated. If the great majority of margin buying ended up failing for the most part, even without looking at the price fluctuations I know, filled with that much self-confidence, there was serenity in my mind at that moment. Just need 90 million wools, right? We have 270 million wools right now, so the total amount of capital we can put up is 780 million wools. It isn't a small amount, but it isn't perfect either. If we started right off the bat, we'd be done for. Investing was like a game of rock, paper, scissors, except it let you cheat and show your hand after everyone else. Even if you didn't know who put out the order, the screen constantly displayed the number of orders and completed trades. If one watched the same stock patiently, it became very transparent. God damn it! Which participants were involved and how much capital they threw in. When aiming for a fraction of a percent, you really could almost picture the face of your opponent as psychological warfare ramped up. Right now the fish were squirming back and forth, especially on the last day of the contest, where there were people who couldn't reach the top ranks no matter how hard they tried. These people were most likely acting irrationally in desperation. I had to wait until they tired themselves out. People like that were mostly playing this like a game. When gaming, if one were to play after losing motivation, interest would wane quickly. The one thing that should be a concern were the ones who were thinking they could profit by taking positions opposite to ours. If I just dashed off and threw in too much money, a stock at, for example, 1,000 wools would just pop up to 1,200 wools. If that happened, the sellers would close in. Certainly, a lot of them would sell at 1,200 wools, I suppose. The ones holding on to the stock would sell at a high price with a smile on their face. The margin sellers would write a 1,200 wool selling price on their position list, and if it fell, then the fall would lead to profits for them. On the other hand, were we to hold on to stocks bought at the price of 1,200 wools each, we would have no choice but to take a stand and drain our funds. Really, the only thing I could do now was pray like Lisa. We're certain to lose. To win, we had to make the opposite happen. So we waited patiently. Within the marketplace, those running out of time alongside those who had lost interest probably left, leading to the continuing decrease in trading. The water that traders needed to swim in was very rapidly drying up in the marketplace. In technical terms, normally it would be said that liquidity had dried up. If there weren't others to trade with, the smallest of orders would cause the prices to fluctuate wildly up or down. But if the price went up, then sellers would surge forth, and when the price went down, then buyers will surge forth. I waited. as the red letters denoting the time left till the end of the investment contest continued to change as time elapsed. I did nothing and waited. Black Chocolate Corporated was a company that had a low trade volume. It wasn't a gathering spot for the ones flailing around, but it also wasn't totally ignored either. This was probably because of the large amount of margin buying involved with it. Was it from those who were still trading? Or perhaps for those who had already left the marketplace? Without knowing that, though you couldn't follow his trend, there was a feeling that any possible movement would be large. Given that atmosphere, it should have brought in more interest, yet it wasn't really well traded. I always made sure to close all positions 10 minutes before the markets closed. In the marketplace, the last 10 minutes was where the demons lurked. But right now, I decided to become the demon. The 760 million wools of capital at my disposal was a large sum of money, even for the imaginary marketplace. Even for the guy behind me in third place, obstructions and chaos in the marketplace caused him to lose 110 million wools in capital, leaving him with less than 300 million in leveraged funds. On top of that, excluding myself and Mr. Trosh, the numbers and positions changed furiously in a great blur. At times, there would be someone pulling upwards in ranking, like a fish surging forth in a flash of brilliance, to rise up only briefly before dropping and sinking further. For someone to look at the rankings, it would not be too strange for someone to get the misconception that I was done with trading. I didn't make any moves, partly also to feed those misconceptions. With the morning trading finished, I ate the food Lisa prepared and then I waited quietly. Not once did Hagana open her mouth to say anything. An hour later, the market opened and we went in to observe. The share of Black Chocolate Corporated went up in value by 9 wools versus the previous day, and it was now trading at 812 wools. The total trade volume from this morning was slightly over 40,000 shares. In other words, no more than about 32 million wools in capital had moved. Even looking at the margin trading balance, for the most part, there was no movement. About time to stir things up. I muttered to myself as I entered a market order for 3,000 shares. Within the dizzying pace of the trading board that I had been monitoring up until that point, I could feel the rumblings of a disturbance coming. It was the sound of a giant whale swimming. Keen-minded individuals probably felt it. After hesitating on my order, there was an agreement and the share price became 813 wools. And then, as if acting in concert, someone also sold 3,000 shares. 812 wools. The fish were gathering, and for the most part, these were the thinker types. The time slowly became 2 o'clock, a little less than 3 hours to go. Within a span of about 5 minutes, I made market orders for 2,000 shares and then 3,000 shares. Drawn by that sound, the trade volume slowly started to rise. Sellers and buyers were gathered, and it looked like the sellers were prevailing slightly as the price became 810 wools. Though the tens mark acted as an obstruction, the sellers slowly started to eat away at that barrier. Soon it was 3 o'clock, and on the trading screen, there was an announcement from the contest sponsors. 2 hours remained. Everyone was trying to do something or another with the remaining time. Though it was obvious enough, that alone was enough to cause some commotion. As the trade volume went up another tick, I made my move. Hagana looked like she wanted to say something as I became aware that she was looking at me. But I ignored her and continued to stare at the screen. 317. The commotion from the announcement died down, and everyone took a moment to take a deep breath. In one stroke, I made a oh gosh. This gets more intense. In one stroke, I made a market order for 100,000 shares, roughly 80 million moves, 10% of the amount I could trade with. Naturally, for a buy order such as that, there wouldn't be enough sell orders to accommodate it. With each sell order coming one after another, the price suddenly raced upward. 811, 812, 813, 815, 818, and so forth. The price kept moving upwards, and from time to time it would match with someone's sell order. Owing to a quirk of the trading system perhaps, the upward swing would only stop for an instant. It was certainly enough to wake up anyone who was asleep at the wheel. It started. I laughed with a complacent smile. Up until then, 100 shares, 200 shares, and at most 3,000 and 4,000 were transacted before things suddenly went up another order of magnitude. Water. There's water here. The fish came seeking a place to swim, and the spot where they gathered became the water for other fish as more and more were drawn to it. 20,000 shares sold, 10,000 shares bought, 5,000 shares bought, 7,000 shares sold. Seller's advantage. If you looked at the margin trading balance, it was proceeding naturally. If the price went up, margin buyers would come selling things off in a hurry. Before that happened, one would sell, hoping to sell and run at a high price. The people thinking that way were numerous, and the ones scrambling to sell would continue to increase. 813, 811, 810, so forth, 809. I thought I heard the sound of Hagana curling her hands into fists, but maybe I was imagining things. The tens barrier was broken. 808, 807, 806, the price continued to fall. The push from the momentum brought along other traders who caught wind of it, and systematically they also came together. 804, 802, 800. At the hundreds mark, the buy orders increased by 200,000, but the raging assault pounded that mark relentlessly. If that wall fell, then the price would continue to fall. If the buyers were to ride this out, sorry about that. Anyway, if the buyers were to ride this out, then selling would become more difficult, so the buyers supported that level fervently. The offense and defense continued as I pressed the key. While everyone was fighting with wooden poles, I felt like I was calling the shots from the tank. A buy order of 200,000 shares by a single person was made. The battle was reversed. How? Hagana mumbled my name, but it didn't seem to get my attention. Apparently the excess of mental stress was what caused her to mumble pointlessly. I made a sidelong glance and saw Hagana staring intently at the terminal, not bothering to look up at all. Last night I had said that this trading was for Hagana's sake. That time, Hagana was really in a panic. That was why Hagana was waiting in anticipation. She was awkwardly expectant of the outcome. That awkwardness was because, up until this point in Hagana's life, I was sure that she knew all too well that hopes had no meaning. A long time ago, it wouldn't be too out of the question to think that she might have given up on hoping for anything. But it was a boon to have been able to utilize Hagana's mathematical prowess for real-world problems, and Hagana responded to that. Hope was most definitely not meaningless. If something couldn't be done, sow it until it can be done. That was definitely not a meaningless thing. Her face held hope in an almost tragically awkward way, saying that hoping wasn't meaningless. Margin buying has increased. Looks like it was as you had described it. The share price returned to 814 rubles. It didn't go any higher because it didn't go any higher because if it increased any more, then sellers would come knocking, knowing that buyers also lay in wait for the price to go down before buying. Among traders, there must be those who made orders without fully understanding why. Within those, I watched the margin buys closely. More or less there was movement, but not very large movement. After shaking it so much, if they didn't move, then they must have been mostly dead. Based on calculations, almost 80% should be dead. 80%! The margin debt balance in total was 1.15 million shares. 80% of that was 920,000 shares. In other words, even if the price goes up and sellers came forth, 200,000 shares would be valued at 160 million mules. The leftover funds would still be over 500 million mules. It should have been doable. How? The price. And as Hagana said it, I looked at the share price. It continued to rise. It continued to rise. 815, 816, 817. Someone fairly big had shown up. The sellers issued a challenge, but the buyers showed up and the price headed towards 824. The time was now 4 o'clock. There was 1 hour left. For the ones with little by way of funds who were thinking of clawing their way into the top ranks by somehow grabbing onto the sudden huge rallies and sell-offs, it must have felt like they only had an hour left to do things. The remaining fish flocked to the stocks with even a bit of trade volume. Black Chocolate Corporate had caught a fair amount of fire too. After the price rose to 824, in one instant it dropped to 813, and in another instant it returned to 824 once more. She looked at that and spoke. Someone else's program has appeared. Perhaps so. The response is too quick and the way it calls out the prices is too uniform. Like a pinball, the price fluctuated along the same width. Suddenly, the price fluctuations started to move. It was clear that a program like Hagana's was trading according to the price as derived from the statistical price fluctuations. There was a limit to how fast a human's hands could move, so letting a computer handle things would take profits of less than 1% and repeat hundreds of times, allowing profits to pile up. But in the end, it only worked because there were foolish humans who went along with the machine's patterns of trading. Now that it was the last day of the contest, the ones who would prey on these were filtering in. They were the ones who thought things out. The price jumped up to 832 mules. The program responded and pursued faithfully. Sellers got into the fray, which led to an explosion in trade volume. The time was now approaching 4:30. As expected, Hagana was looking straight at me. Hal. I looked at her slowly. I then nodded. Don't get scared. I shrugged my shoulders, then laughed. If you do, then it's over. Again, I waited. I waited for Bentley. The last 30 minutes, from the viewpoint of those immersed in the marketplace, was when time seemed to go by in a flash. Yeah, time flies by fast when focusing. For the most part, people were at their limits, making orders in desperation. That price fluctuation was sending them equally through heaven and hell. It'd be bad if one were to give in to that torrent of emotion. You had to see through to people's intent. For mafia and war films, reckless actions were executed only in the last 10 minutes. The ones who die off easily were the ones who put their lives on the line in the last 30 minutes. 20 minutes. Hagana mumbled worriedly. The price was 824 mules. It wasn't exactly a whale, but a sell order for 200,000 shares appeared. I put a buy order out for 300,000 shares. There was a whale. Oh boy, a big-ass whale. It seemed as if I could hear the voice in the minds of everyone who was participating. Birds that saw the spout of a whale gathered, just like sharks smelling blood in the water gathered. Good. Wait a minute. Birds that saw the spout of a whale gathered. That's a one way to express a metaphor. Sellers put out sell orders in a screaming frenzy, but the buyers kept buying mercilessly. Many people understood why the whale appeared on the buy side. The margin debt balance was not sell orders waiting in the wings. They were dead. A dead paper tiger that said nothing. The price crossed over 840 mules and reached 850. My average stock unit price was 820 mules, which added up by a grand total of 490 million mules. If the price went up by less than 4%, then that would be 60 million mules. It wasn't bad, but it wasn't enough. It wasn't enough at all. With the remaining 400 million mools, I had to make up a bit less than 100 million mools in unrealized gains. Timing. It was all about timing. I had to become the demon. I must laugh loudly and run past the people who could only stare at their screen dumbfounded and yell out in a half-crazed frenzy, unable to make an order in time. The place to focus on was here. Here it was. I let the time slip by, 1 minute after another. 13 minutes remained. 12 minutes. 11 minutes. 10 minutes? I didn't put out an order. It wasn't time yet. Sellers sold frantically while buyers bought frantically. The margin trading balance changed in a bustling manner. Margin selling was piling up, as was margin buying. Margin buying wouldn't collapse. Same thing. This could work. At the moment I was about to make the final buy order. How? Hagana's shout stopped my hand. Hagana's finger pointed at the margin debt balance. Those numbers decreased suddenly. Is it selling? I think it's people who bought earlier and are selling it off now. In that case, we had to wait just a bit longer. In order to get the greatest effect, it had to be after selling had dropped. However, a sense of foreboding crept up my spine. Before things took off, the total margin debt balance was 1.05 million shares. After things took off, the part that piled on afterwards was at most 300,000 shares. Despite that, that number had already dropped up to 700,000 shares. There's a calculation error in the estimate. Hagana said it, as if reading what I was thinking. How much? The square root of that figure, in other words, 100,000 shares. The error range. It was true that any movement had stopped at a bit less than 700,000 shares. Did all those margin buyers decide to sell? Were they anticipating a price drop? 7 minutes left. I had to decide now if I was going to put out an order. The price was at 836 mools. If the number of orders was too great, there was a possibility that the orders wouldn't be agreed upon. That is, the outstanding orders wouldn't be processed and funds would get returned. That was bad. Frankly speaking, it was bad. There was nothing more disgraceful than losing while holding funds. It was the same as those who were so foolish as to be overly cautious and still ended up dead in the water. I prepared an order with 400,000 shares. But what would happen if there was a large number of margin buyers still alive in the game? If that were the case, then we had to hold on until the last minute, or we'd get hit by opposing orders. The chance of that was a 50-50. Alright, save here. Because, oh man, that was intense. So next part, let's see how the results would go on the last day of the trading contest. So, like, comment, and subscribe. See you then.